Growing up, I never understood why my parents' bedroom door was always locked. Once a month, they'd disappear inside with stacks of envelopes, emerging hours later with weary faces and hushed arguments. I noticed it first when I was 7, but it wasn't until 2 decades later that I learned what those envelopes really meant and how they would shatter everything I believed about my family. I'm Kate, and 6 months ago, I thought I had a normal middle-class childhood. Sure, my parents had their favorites. Rebecca, my older sister, always seemed to be the star. They never missed her dance recitals or science fairs, while my achievements usually got distracted. That's nice, honey, at the dinner table. Still, they kept a roof over our heads, sent us to good schools, and always seemed to make ends meet. At least that's what I thought. 3 months after my grandmother's funeral, my phone rang at work. I had just made junior partner at the accounting firm and was neck deep in client files when the call came. "Is this Catherine Mitchell?" The voice was clipped, professional. "Yes, speaking. This is James Cooper from Meridian Bank. We're calling about your overdue loans. They've been in default for 6 months, and we need to discuss immediate payment arrangements." I froze. "I don't have any loans with Meridian Bank. You must have the wrong person." There was a pause. "According to our records, you're the primary holder of 3 loans totaling $486,000, all signed in January of this year. The paperwork has your signature." My stomach twisted. "That's impossible. I never signed for any loans." "Perhaps you should review your records," he said. "If we don't receive payment in 30 days, we'll begin legal proceedings." After hanging up, I pulled up my credit report, hands trembling. There it was in black and white, 3 massive loans, all dated January 15th, the same month Grandma Rose passed away. Grandma Rose was the one person who always made me feel seen. While my parents fawned over Rebecca, Grandma showed up to my spelling bees, framed my crayon drawings, and taught me how to manage money. "You've got a head for numbers, Katie girl," she'd say. "That'll take you far." She lived modestly but had saved wisely. Everyone knew she had a substantial nest egg. After her funeral, my parents insisted on handling all the paperwork. Grief-stricken, I didn't think twice about it. Now, with my credit report staring back at me, the pieces started falling into place. I called Rebecca. "Hey, Becca," I said, my voice tight. "Did you get your inheritance from Grandma Rose?" "Yeah," she said casually. "Mom and Dad handled everything. I got a check for $250,000. Didn't you?" I hung up and drove straight to my parents' house. Mom opened the door with her usual forced smile. "Katie, what a surprise." "We need to talk," I said, stepping inside. Dad glanced up from the recliner, his face hardening when he saw me. "What's this about?" "Grandma's inheritance, and the loans in my name." The change in the room was instant. Mom's smile vanished. Dad muted the TV, his jaw tightening. "Sit down, Catherine," he said. "There are things you don't understand." I stayed standing. "Explain it then. Why did you take out loans in my name? Why didn't I get my inheritance?" Mom wrung her hands. "It's complicated, honey. We did what we had to do for the family." "For Rebecca, you mean?" Dad stood, his voice sharp. "Your sister has 2 kids, a mortgage, and a husband who's barely making ends meet. She needed her inheritance clean. We couldn't let the debts touch her future." "And mine?" I snapped. "You stole $500,000 from me." "You're single," Mom said softly. "No kids, no major expenses. You have a great job. We knew you'd manage." "Manage?" I let out a bitter laugh. "You think this is manageable? You forged my signature, stole my inheritance, and destroyed my credit." "We're your parents," Dad said, his tone final. "We made a decision for the good of the family. You'll understand one day." "No," I said coldly. "What you did wasn't for the family. It was for Rebecca, and it was fraud." Their protests followed me out the door, but I didn't look back. At home, I opened my laptop and began writing emails to the bank's fraud department, to a lawyer, to anyone who could help me fight this. With each keystroke, I felt years of resentment boiling over. I'd spent my whole life being the overlooked daughter, the one expected to understand, to sacrifice, to step aside. But not this time. My parents thought I was the quiet one, the easy one. They didn't realize I'd inherited more than Grandma's head for numbers. I'd also inherited her backbone. The next few months were a whirlwind of revelations, legal battles, and a painfully slow disentanglement from the tangled web my parents had woven. Detective Chen and the Financial Crimes Unit wasted no time. Armed with the forged documents, my testimony, and corroborating evidence from the bank, they built a solid case against my parents. News of the investigation spread quickly within our extended family. Calls and messages flooded my phone, most of them accusing me of airing dirty laundry or destroying the family. The loudest voice, of course, was Rebecca's. She left me a voicemail so venomous that I stopped listening halfway through and deleted it. It wasn't just the emotional toll. I was fighting battles on multiple fronts. The bank had temporarily flagged my accounts, and I had to hire another lawyer to ensure my credit score and finances were restored. My firm, to its credit, stood by me, but I could feel the subtle shift in how some colleagues viewed me. The whispers in the hall, the sympathetic but wary glances, it was exhausting. My parents, on the other hand, doubled down. They hired a defense attorney and tried to paint themselves as victims of misunderstandings and family miscommunications. Their lawyer even suggested that I had misremembered signing the documents. But their story quickly unraveled when forensic handwriting experts confirmed the forgeries and financial records showed the clear transfer of funds from Grandma Rose's accounts to cover their years of mounting debts. The trial was grueling. Sitting in the courtroom, hearing the details of their financial mismanagement, their lies, and their deliberate betrayal was like ripping open a wound that never seemed to heal. But the hardest part was watching them. My once confident father looked smaller, his shoulders hunched under the weight of his choices. My mother avoided my gaze entirely, her expression a mix of defiance and shame. Rebecca testified on their behalf, painting a picture of selfless parents who had sacrificed everything for their children. She cried on a stand, talking about her twins, her husband's accident, and how much she owed our parents for their support. But even her theatrics couldn't erase the facts. The evidence was undeniable. When the verdict came, it was both a relief and a heartbreak. Guilty on multiple counts of fraud and forgery, the sentence was lenient: probation, community service, and mandatory financial counseling. But the damage was done. Their reputation, their relationships, and their once comfortable lives were in shambles. After the trial, I expected some sense of closure, but instead, there was a hollow ache. I hadn't just lost my parents, I had lost the illusion of who they were. For weeks, I avoided calls from family members, refusing to defend myself or justify my actions anymore. I focused on rebuilding my finances, my career, and my sense of self. One evening, as I sorted through some old belongings, I found a letter from Grandma Rose, written to me when I turned 18. Her neat, slanted handwriting brought tears to my eyes as I read. Dear Katie girl, life isn't always fair, and people, especially the ones we love, can disappoint us. But you, my dear, have something rare: the strength to face the truth and the courage to do what's right, even when it's hard. Never let anyone dim that light in you. It will guide you, no matter how dark things seem. Her words felt like a balm to my soul. I realized then that while I couldn't change what had happened, I could choose how it defined me. I wasn't just the daughter who had been betrayed of a sister who stood up to her family. I was Kate, strong, independent, and finally free. As the months passed, I began to heal. I reconnected with friends, threw myself into work, and even started volunteering at a nonprofit that helped victims of financial abuse. Slowly but surely, I started to feel like myself again, only this time, a version of me that knew her worth. I still get the occasional message from Rebecca, filled with guilt trips and veiled accusations. Mom and Dad, they haven't reached out since the trial. And that's okay. For the first time in my life, I no longer feel the need to chase their approval or mend what they broke. Some might say I destroyed my family, but I think of it differently. I stopped letting them destroy me. The local headlines were relentless. Parents arrested for financial fraud against daughter splashed across the front page, turning my family's secrets into public fodder. Mom and Dad's arrest was far from dramatic. No SWAT teams, no shouting, no door kicking. Just 2 police cars parked in front of their suburban house on a quiet Tuesday morning. They walked out slowly, heads bowed, avoiding the curious stares of their neighbors. I watched from my car, parked half a block away. My hands clenched the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles were white. As the officers guided them toward the squad cars, Mom looked up and saw me. Her expression, A blend of betrayal, anger, and something else I couldn't quite name seared itself into my memory. That look would haunt me for weeks. The evidence against them was airtight. Detective Chen called it one of the cleanest cases of fraud she'd ever worked. Not only had my parents forged my signature on multiple loan applications, but they also fabricated an intricate paper trail to make it appear as though I'd willingly taken on their debts. The truth was far simpler. I hadn't seen a cent, only a pile of debt and the shattered remnants of trust. Rebecca, of course, went on the offensive immediately. The day after the arrest, she posted on social media, "My sister has torn this family apart. She had our elderly parents arrested out of jealousy and spite. They've done nothing but support her, and this is how she repays them. Please help us fight this injustice." She attached a photo of our parents at one of her twins' birthday parties, their arms around the smiling kids. The post went viral in our small town, sparking a flood of messages. Some were hateful, others cautiously supportive, and a few came from people who'd experienced similar betrayals by their own families. I read every message, even the strings of angry emojis, trying to process the whirlwind of emotions they stirred up. 2 weeks later, Rebecca's husband Tom called me out of the blue. His voice was subdued, far removed from the confident persona he usually projected. "Cake," he began hesitantly, "I need to talk to you. Can we meet? It's important." We met at a quiet coffee shop on the edge of town. Tom looked exhausted, his face lined with stress as he fidgeted with his coffee cup. "Rebecca doesn't know I'm here," he admitted. "But after everything that's happened, I started going through our finances. The inheritance she got, most of it's gone." My stomach sank. "What do you mean gone?" He sighed. "Online gambling. She's been doing it for years. Your parents knew. That's why they were so desperate to protect her share. They thought if she got enough money at once, she'd turn things around. Instead," he trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. "She gambled it away," I said quietly, the puzzle pieces finally clicking into place. Their constant financial struggles, the frantic attempts to shield her from the consequences of her choices. It all made sense now. The criminal case moved quickly. The evidence left no room for plausible deniability, and their lawyer urged them to accept a plea deal. On the day of the hearing, I sat at the back of the courtroom, watching as they stood before the judge. "Mr. and Mrs. Mitchell," the judge's voice was firm, "you are charged with multiple counts of fraud, forgery, and conspiracy. These crimes are particularly egregious because they were committed against your own daughter. Do you understand the charges?" "Yes, Your Honor," they murmured, their voices barely audible. Mom's shoulders shook as she wept silently, while Dad stood motionless, his face etched with regret and defeat. The judge sentenced them to 3 years of probation, mandatory financial counseling, and full restitution of the stolen funds, along with penalties. Jail time was off the table, but their lives would never be the same. Afterward, as they walked out of the courthouse, Mom approached me. Her tear-streaked face was a picture of desperation. "Katie, please." I stopped her with a raised hand. "Not now, Mom, maybe not for a long time." That evening, as I sat in my apartment, a letter from Maria, my lawyer, arrived in my inbox. The bank had cleared my credit and erased the fraudulent debts. I was officially free. My phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca. "I hope you're happy. You've ruined everything." I started typing a response, then paused. Instead, I opened my contacts and dialed a number I'd saved but never called. "Gambling Addiction Helpline. How can I assist you?" "Hi," I said after a moment's hesitation. "I need information about your family support programs. It's for my sister." 6 months later, my life looks completely different. My parents are scraping by with part-time jobs to make restitution payments. Rebecca has finally started attending counseling for her gambling addiction, though she still refuses to speak to me. The twins, I'm told, ask about me sometimes. But in the family narrative, I've become the villain, the name no one says out loud. Last week, I closed on my first home. It's small and modest, but it's mine, bought with my own money and clean credit. Standing in the empty living room, holding the keys, I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. For the first time in my life, I'm not carrying anyone else's burdens. I've turned the smallest bedroom into an office, and on the wall, I've hung a single photo. Grandma Rose and me at my college graduation. Her proud smile reminds me of the strength she always said I had. Yesterday, a letter from Mom arrived in the mail. I recognized her handwriting instantly, but instead of the familiar wave of guilt and obligation, I felt nothing. I placed it, unopened, in a desk drawer. Maybe one day I'll read it, but for now I'm focused on something else. Building a life where strength doesn't mean sacrifice, love isn't conditional, and freedom doesn't come at the cost of my peace. For the first time, my story is mine alone.